Imagine this. You've got a close-knit family, a brother, a sister, and a friendship that seems as innocent as can be. Your sister's best friend comes around all the time, and at first you think nothing of it. But then, the brother starts noticing strange things, things that don't add up, things that feel off. Maybe it's the way the friend acts around his sister, or perhaps the constant need for privacy. He can't quite put his finger on it, but that gut feeling is telling him something's not right. You've probably felt that same feeling before, haven't you? It's like an invisible alarm going off in the back of your mind, warning you of something that's just out of reach, something you can't see but feel is there. And then, one day, the brother makes a discovery that changes everything, a simple Facebook post. Just a post, you might think, but it's the kind of post that sends a chill down your spine. A post that reveals something so shocking, so unexpected, that it feels like everything he thought he knew about his sister's friendship is suddenly in question. This is the moment that things take a turn, the moment when the brother's suspicions go from a faint whisper to a full-blown storm of doubt. What he finds isn't just a few suspicious photos or cryptic messages, it's something far more revealing and far more dangerous. But here's the thing, you're probably wondering, what was it in that Facebook post that made the brother's suspicions turn into a full-fledged investigation? What did he see that sent him down a rabbit hole of secrets, lies, and revelations? You're going to find out in just a few minutes. But first, let's dive deeper into the story and the characters. This isn't just a tale about a suspicious brother and a mysterious friend. It's about trust, family, and the dark side of things we sometimes overlook. It's about the times we ignore the little signs, thinking they don't mean much, only to later realize they were telling us something all along. As we go through the details, I want you to think back to your own life for a moment. Have you ever had a situation where you trusted someone completely, only for that trust to be shattered in an instant? Maybe it was a friend who let you down, or a family member who betrayed you. That feeling of being blindsided, it's one of the hardest to process. You start questioning everything, doubting your own judgment, wondering if you've been living in a lie. That's what the brother goes through as he unravels the mystery behind his sister's friend. But there's more to this story than just trust. This is also about the things people hide, the secrets they keep buried deep inside. Sometimes, the truth is so hidden beneath layers of lies and deception that it takes something small, something seemingly insignificant, to uncover it. A Facebook post, a comment, a picture, these are the things that can tear apart a carefully constructed facade. And what the brother uncovers in this one post will leave you speechless. Now, let's take a moment to talk about the sister. She's just like any other young woman, full of life, surrounded by friends, and seemingly unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. But as her brother gets deeper into his investigation, he starts to see her in a whole new light. Was she really as innocent as she appeared, or had she been hiding something all along? The brother's fear grows, not just for what he's discovered about the friend, but for what he might uncover about his sister's involvement in this twisted web of deceit. I know you're on the edge of your seat right now, wondering what happens next. How did this Facebook post confirm the brother's worst fears? What secrets were revealed that no one saw coming? Trust me, you're going to want to stay with me for the next part of this story. You'll find yourself questioning everything. Was the brother right to be suspicious? Was he overreacting? Or did he uncover something far darker than anyone could have imagined? And what happens when family members are caught in the middle of a friendship gone wrong? But before we dive into the revelation that will leave you stunned, I want you to think about something. What would you do if you were in the brother's shoes? Would you confront the friend? Would you talk to your sister? Or would you keep digging for more answers? Because, as you'll see, the brother's journey isn't just about discovering the truth. It's about what happens after that truth comes crashing down. And trust me, it's not what anyone expected. So, what was it in that Facebook post? What did the brother find that changed everything? To get the full picture, you'll have to keep watching because the answer is closer than you think. And I promise you, once you know the truth, you won't be able to stop thinking about it. The layers of this story are just starting to peel away, and the deeper we go, the more shocking the revelations become. Stay tuned, because the answers are coming, and they're not what you expect. As the brother continued to dig into his sister's life, It became clear that the mystery was far more complex than a simple case of trust. There was a sense of unease that he couldn't shake, a growing realization that something had been off for a while. He'd always been protective of his sister, watching over her as any older brother would, but recently, he had noticed subtle changes in her behavior that were impossible to ignore. She was more distant than usual, avoiding eye contact during conversations, keeping her phone close at all times, and even taking secretive calls late at night. At first, he brushed it off as teenage rebellion or just the typical mood swings that came with growing up. After all, what did he know about the world of friendships and relationships that she was navigating? But the more he observed, the more it felt like something deeper was at play. His gut told him there was more to this than he could understand, and that instinct was something he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just his sister, who had changed, though. Her friend, the one who had been in their lives for years, seemed to be pulling strings in the background. The friend, who we'll call Rachel, had always been the quiet type, never too flashy, always in the background, but there was something in the way she carried herself that felt a little too calculated, a little too polished. Rachel was a master of blending in, of never standing out too much, but always managing to get what she wanted. She had been around since high school, hanging out with the sister and her group of friends. Over the years, she'd been a constant fixture at family gatherings, birthdays, and holidays. But lately, the brother had begun to notice strange little details that didn't sit right with him. It wasn't anything overt, but it was there, in the way Rachel would smile just a little too knowingly, in the way she'd casually brush off conversations or steer them in odd directions. It was like she was playing a game, and he wasn't sure whether he was a player or just a pawn. The first red flag came when the sister started acting differently around Rachel. She was no longer the carefree girl he once knew. Gone were the days of laughing with her friends, carefree and full of joy. Now, there were moments of silence when Rachel would enter the room, moments where the sister would glance nervously at her phone or dart her eyes away when he tried to talk to her about Rachel. It was subtle, but he couldn't ignore it. It was like she was afraid of something, maybe even afraid of her friend. But what was so terrifying about Rachel? Could she have been manipulating his sister all this time? The thought was unsettling, but the brother couldn't shake it. Then came the night that changed everything. It was just another family dinner, the kind they'd had 1,000 times before. The brother was in the kitchen, helping his mom prepare dinner when Rachel arrived. He didn't think much of it at first, but then he noticed something strange. His sister was unusually quiet, sitting off to the side with her phone in hand, her eyes glued to the screen. Rachel, on the other hand, was more animated than usual, talking a bit too much, laughing a little too loudly. There was a tension in the air, like something was about to happen, but no one else seemed to notice. The brother watched his sister as she glanced at Rachel, then quickly looked away, her face turning slightly pale. Was Rachel's presence unsettling her, or was it something else? It wasn't long after that he started to get the feeling that Rachel had been keeping secrets of her own, secrets that had nothing to do with their small group of friends. The brother started paying closer attention to Rachel's online activity. He had always been a little tech-savvy, and it wasn't too hard to figure out how to access her public profiles on social media. What he found was nothing short of alarming. While there were plenty of harmless posts about parties and friends, there were also cryptic messages that seemed to hint at something darker. A comment here, a post there, all pointing to a web of hidden connections he didn't understand. The most disturbing of all was a series of private messages between Rachel and an unknown contact. The conversation was encrypted, coded, but there was enough there for him to see a pattern that spoke to some sort of plan, some sort of scheme. He couldn't make sense of it, but he knew it wasn't good. Could Rachel have been involved in something illegal? Was she manipulating his sister to cover up something far more dangerous than anyone realized? Or was there something else at play entirely? The more the brother dug, the more questions piled up, and the more confused he became. And just when he thought he might be getting closer to understanding what was going on, something unexpected happened. The sister began to pull away even more, refusing to talk to him about her friend, shutting him out entirely. It was as if she was protecting Rachel, almost as if she were part of whatever this mystery was. It was a blow to the brother. He had always been her protector, the one who looked out for her. But now, it seemed like she was shutting him out, and the person she was turning to wasn't him. That hurt, but it also made him more determined to get to the bottom of things. Things took another strange turn when the brother found something else, another post, but this time, it wasn't on Rachel's page. It was a post on his sister's Facebook account. A single photo, taken in the middle of the night, showing her standing outside an unfamiliar house, looking around nervously. It wasn't just the photo that caught his attention, it was the caption, something vague and unsettling. "You were right, but now it's too late." The brother's heart dropped. What did that mean?
Who was she talking to?
Why was she out there in the middle of the night at an unknown location? And why had she posted it publicly, yet kept it so cryptic? The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture was still too blurry to understand. Every new discovery only raised more questions, and the tension was building to a breaking point. The brother knew that he couldn't keep digging without confronting his sister, but he was terrified of what he might uncover. Could Rachel have been pulling the strings all along, or was there someone else involved? The closer he got to the truth, the further he seemed to slip into the unknown, and the more the web of lies and secrets seemed to stretch out before him. But just as he was about to confront his sister, another message came through, a direct message from an unknown account. The subject line read, "Don't trust Rachel. She's not who you think she is." The message had been a shock to the brother, a warning that sent a chill down his spine. Don't trust Rachel. She's not who you think she is. The words burned into his mind, echoing over and over as he tried to make sense of them. Who had sent the message? Was it someone trying to help? Or was it another trap, a ploy to throw him off track? He didn't know, but one thing was for certain, he couldn't ignore it. His instincts were telling him that the web of lies was far deeper than he had originally thought. Rachel's carefully crafted persona, the one that had always seemed so harmless, was starting to crumble, piece by piece. And yet, there was something even more unnerving lurking beneath the surface. As the brother tried to piece together his sister's strange behavior and Rachel's cryptic messages, he was hit with an unexpected setback. The photo, the one that had been taken in the middle of the night, with the unsettling caption, had mysteriously disappeared from his sister's Facebook account. At first, he thought it might have been a mistake, some glitch in the system, but when he checked again, it was gone. Vanished without a trace. There was no explanation, no reason for it to disappear. The brother felt the weight of the loss, the frustration building up inside him. That photo had been a key piece of evidence, one that might have helped him figure out just what was going on. And now it was gone, leaving behind only more questions. Was someone trying to erase all traces of whatever had happened? Or was his sister involved in this somehow, hiding the truth from him? It was impossible to know, and that uncertainty gnawed at him. But just as he was starting to feel like he was getting nowhere, things took a darker turn. The brother received another message, this time from an anonymous number, a voice on the other end of the phone that was cold and menacing. You need to stop digging. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. The warning was clear. Someone didn't want him to find out the truth. The voice, though distorted and unrecognizable, sent a shiver down his spine. It was a threat, and it made him question whether he was really ready to face whatever secrets Rachel and his sister were hiding. But it also made him more determined. He had to press on, no matter the cost. There was no turning back now. Days passed, and the tension only grew. The brother's relationship with his sister had become strained, almost non-existent. She was distant, cold, and refused to talk about Rachel or the things that had been happening. He knew she was hiding something, but every attempt to get close to her seemed to push her further away. Was she protecting Rachel? Or was she involved in something even darker than he could imagine? It was hard to tell, but what was clear was that the more he tried to uncover, the more people seemed to warn him to stop. A friend of his sister's had even called him, telling him he should stay out of it, that he was overreacting, that everything was fine. But his gut told him something was very wrong, and the more they told him to stop, the more suspicious it made him. In the midst of all this, another piece of the puzzle emerged. A new detail surfaced about Rachel's past, one that seemed to have been deliberately hidden. The brother stumbled upon an old article from a local news website, a report about a woman who had gone missing several years ago, someone whose name he recognized. It was Rachel's mother. The article detailed how Rachel's mother had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a cryptic message: "She'll never find me." The article was old, buried deep in the archives of the website, but it sent a shockwave through the brother. What was the connection? Was Rachel's past as spotless as she made it seem, or had there been something more sinister at play? The article raised more questions than it answered, and the brother was left reeling, trying to make sense of it all. Was this the key to understanding Rachel's strange behavior? Was her mother's disappearance connected to the lies she was telling now? Or was there something darker lurking in Rachel's past, something she was trying to hide from everyone? But just when the brother thought he might be on the verge of uncovering the truth, another unexpected obstacle appeared. His phone was hacked. His personal information, his texts, and even some of his private photos were mysteriously leaked online. At first, he thought it might be a coincidence, but the more he investigated, the more it became clear that someone had intentionally accessed his phone. Was this another warning? Another attempt to intimidate him into backing off? The brother had no idea, but one thing was certain: whoever was behind this knew exactly what they were doing. They were playing a dangerous game, and he was now firmly caught in the middle of it. The walls were closing in on him, and it seemed like every step forward only led to more confusion and danger. He didn't know who to trust anymore. Was Rachel truly the villain, or was there someone else pulling the strings? His own sister, the person he had always relied on, had become a stranger, someone who was slipping further and further away from him with each passing day. And the more he uncovered, the more it felt like he was being pushed into a corner with no way out. Just when it seemed like he was about to get a breakthrough, a shocking new twist emerged. While going through some old family photos, the brother found something that left him speechless. A picture of Rachel, taken years ago, standing beside a man he didn't recognize. The man had his arm around her, and they looked close, almost like family. But there was something about the way they stood together that felt off, like they shared a secret. The brother didn't know who the man was, but he had a feeling that this photo, this new lead, would change everything. What was the connection? And how did it fit into the twisted puzzle of Rachel's life? As the brother stared at the photo, a single thought raced through his mind: I'm closer than ever to uncovering the truth, but I'm also in more danger than I've ever been before. Just when the brother thought he had reached the brink of something big, something final, the ground beneath his investigation shifted again. Only this time, it wasn't just his world unraveling. The ripple effect of his digging had reached someone else. His best friend Marcus, who had been helping him gather information discreetly behind the scenes, suddenly found himself pulled into the vortex. Late one night, Marcus received a package on his doorstep, wrapped in plain brown paper with no return address, no markings, nothing identifiable. Inside was a small flash drive and a single piece of paper that read, "You're not safe either. Walk away." The simplicity of the message made it even more chilling. Marcus, usually calm and skeptical, immediately called the brother, his voice shaking in a way he had never heard before. When they plugged in the drive, it contained one thing: a blurry security camera clip that appeared to show Rachel speaking to a man in a dark hoodie, passing him what looked like a small envelope. There was no timestamp, no audio, no context, just grainy, silent footage that added another layer of confusion to a case already spiraling out of control. The brother's first reaction was disbelief. The clip contradicted everything he thought he knew so far. The location looked vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. Rachel, dressed in all black, glancing nervously around, then handing off the envelope with practiced subtlety. It was a side of her he'd never seen. But was it really her? The footage was too grainy to be certain. Was someone trying to set her up? Or worse, was this proof that she was involved in something far more dangerous than he'd imagined? The timing of the package was no accident. Someone wanted them to see that video. Someone was watching them both and deliberately raising the stakes. The brother couldn't shake the feeling that they were being toyed with, that this wasn't just a warning, but a psychological game being played at a level far beyond what he'd expected. And then, as if to confirm that no one was safe anymore, Marcus's apartment was broken into the following night. Nothing valuable was taken, no electronics, no jewelry, just the flash drive, which was gone without a trace. The rest of the apartment was untouched, making the message clear. We're watching, and we're always one step ahead. That act of precision, the specific targeting of a single piece of evidence, shook both of them to the core. It raised questions neither of them wanted to answer. Who had sent the original package? Why let them see the footage at all if it was only going to be stolen back? Was it a setup? A trap? Or were they being used as pawns in something much larger, something darker and more organized than either of them had imagined? As the brother tried to make sense of the flash drive incident, he revisited that photo he'd found, the one of Rachel and the mystery man. He decided to run the man's image through facial recognition software using a connection Marcus had at a private cybersecurity firm. The results were shocking. The man wasn't just anyone. He was a former private investigator who'd been reported missing 5 years ago under suspicious circumstances. The case had gone cold, the man never found, and no suspects ever named. Now, here he was, smiling in a photo next to Rachel. The connection was undeniable, but what did it mean? Was Rachel involved in his disappearance? Was he still alive? If so, why had he vanished, and why had his path crossed with Rachel's? The brother's mind reeled with possibilities, none of them comforting. Every clue only made things murkier, the lines between right and wrong, truth and lies, blurring more with each discovery. And then came the most unsettling twist yet. The brother's own father, who had been distant and emotionally unavailable for years, came forward with a confession. He claimed that Rachel wasn't some stranger who just became friends with his sister by chance. According to him, Rachel's father and he had once worked together on a government subcontract back in the early 2000s, something involving security clearances, sensitive data, and a scandal that was quickly buried after a whistleblower died under strange circumstances. The brother listened in disbelief as his father described how Rachel's family had vanished after the fallout, changing names, relocating under different identities. They weren't supposed to be here. They were ghosts, his father said, his eyes filled with the kind of fear you don't fake. That revelation turned everything on its head. If Rachel's whole life had been lived under an alias, if she came from a family that had reason to hide, then what did she want with his sister? Was she trying to disappear again? Or was this something much bigger, something orchestrated long before she ever stepped foot into their lives? Suddenly, the brother's investigation wasn't just about protecting his sister from a dangerous friend. It felt like he had uncovered a deeper, more dangerous conspiracy. And yet, even with all the pieces on the table, the full picture remained elusive. Rachel was either a master manipulator with a buried past or an unwilling participant in something far beyond her control. But the real question, the one that made it harder and harder to sleep at night, was who else knew the truth? And why did it feel like everyone was lying? As paranoia set in and the brother realized just how alone he might be, a new text lit up his phone screen, this time from an unknown number with a single message. "You're getting too close. She knows you found the photo." He stared at the message, heart pounding, as his mind raced with questions.
Who sent it? What were they trying to warn him about now?
But the most chilling part wasn't the threat. It was the fact that he never told anyone about that photo. Not a soul. Which meant someone had eyes on him. Inside his home. Or worse, inside his family. The moment the brother read that text, something inside him shifted. That slight thread of curiosity that had started this whole thing, trying to protect his sister from a suspicious friend, was now wrapped in dread, coiled around his spine like ice. This wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It wasn't even about his sister. It had grown into something far more personal, far more sinister. Because now someone knew what he knew. Someone was watching his every move, every message, every conversation. And they weren't trying to hide it anymore. The illusion of safety was gone. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying everything, his conversations with Marcus, the look on Rachel's face in that grainy video, his father's cryptic confession, and now, this anonymous message that knew more than it should. As the hours passed, a storm brewed in his head, louder than the wind outside his window. He thought about calling the police, But what would he even say? That he had suspicions based on a photo and a flash drive that was now missing? That someone might be following him, but hadn't technically done anything illegal? Without hard proof, he knew he'd be dismissed. And deep down, a growing part of him suspected this went beyond what any police officer would be willing or able to touch. It wasn't until the next morning that everything truly fell apart. Marcus didn't show up to work. No call. No message. No warning. His phone went straight to voicemail, and none of his neighbors had seen him since the break-in. The brother drove to his apartment, heart pounding, hoping for a simple explanation. Maybe he'd taken off to clear his head. Maybe he was staying with family, anything normal. But when he reached the building, his gut told him something was off before he even got out of the car. The security door had been propped open with a brick, like someone left in a hurry. The hallway lights flickered, and the smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air. When he reached Marcus's door, it was unlocked. The apartment was a mess, not ransacked, but eerie in its stillness. The bed was unmade, clothes were thrown in a pile, as if he'd been getting ready to go somewhere. His laptop was open but powered off, and the refrigerator door stood slightly ajar. The place didn't feel abandoned. It felt interrupted, like Marcus had been about to leave, but someone or something had stopped him. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no broken glass. But on the kitchen table, there was a single sticky note with the words, "You warned him." That was a mistake. No signature. No explanation. Just those 7 words and a silence, so loud it pressed against the brother's skull like a scream. He stood there, frozen, trying to breathe, trying to think, but the fear clawed at his throat. What had he done? What had he pulled Marcus into? And what was this message really saying? That Marcus was gone because of him? Because he didn't stop digging? He stumbled back into the hallway, legs trembling, checking over his shoulder every few seconds. He didn't know if someone was watching from the shadows, waiting to send another message, or worse, waiting to silence him too. And suddenly, the gravity of it all slammed into him. This was no longer a mystery he could untangle at a safe distance. He was now part of it. He was a target. Back home, paranoia sank its teeth deeper. He covered the webcam on his laptop, turned off his phone, and unplugged every smart device in the apartment. He moved like someone trying to escape a net he could no longer see. Every face on the street looked suspicious. Every car that slowed near his building felt like a threat. He noticed patterns, black SUVs that seemed to pass by more often than they should, a man on a bench who was still there after 2 hours, a woman in a hoodie who kept glancing up at his window. Were they really following him, or had fear started to distort his reality? He didn't know anymore. All he knew was that something dark had latched onto him, and no matter how fast he ran, it was always right behind. He finally decided to confront his sister, not with accusations, but with desperation. She was the one thread that tied all of this together, whether she realized it or not. When he saw her face at the door, calm and innocent as ever, it almost broke him. How could she be at the center of this and still look untouched by the chaos surrounding them? He asked her again about Rachel, where they met, why she trusted her, whether anything had ever seemed off. She stuck to her story, confused but firm. No, Rachel had never done anything strange. No, she hadn't met her through anything shady. No, there was no reason to be suspicious. But then, as he pressed harder, her expression changed. A flicker of something, regret? Guilt? Fear, passed through her eyes. She said one thing before shutting the door. "You don't understand. You never did." And that's when he remembered something. Years ago, before Rachel came into the picture, his sister had gone through a phase where she became withdrawn, quiet, and emotionally distant. At the time, he thought it was just teenage angst or school stress. But now, in this context, it felt like something far more serious had happened. Something traumatic. Something secret. Had Rachel been around back then under a different name, a different identity? Had she returned under a new persona to manipulate her way back into their lives? Or had she been part of something much bigger all along? As the brother dug deeper into old yearbooks, social media archives, and school records, he came across a chilling discovery. There was a girl, same face, different name, who attended his sister's middle school for one semester before vanishing from the records entirely. No forwarding school. No transfer notice. Just gone. And standing next to her in the yearbook photo, smiling, was his sister. They knew each other long before they ever admitted, which meant his sister was lying. And now, more than ever, he didn't know if he could trust her, or if she was protecting something much darker than she realized. The web was growing tighter, and with Marcus gone and threats closing in, the brother realized one terrifying truth. He was running out of time. And just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, his phone buzzed again. Despite being powered off for hours. A new message, no contact ID, just a live photo of his apartment building taken from across the street. Time-stamped only seconds ago. Someone was out there. Watching.
Right now.
He didn't remember falling asleep. One moment, the brother was staring at the photo on his phone, his apartment building captured from a shadowy distance. And the next, he was waking up on the living room floor, fully clothed, with a metallic taste in his mouth and his heart hammering like he'd just run a marathon. The lights were off. His phone was gone. So was his laptop. The window that faced the street was cracked open just slightly, letting in the stale night air and the hum of distant traffic. Someone had been inside. While he slept. Not a break-in, no broken glass, no forced entry, just in and out, clean and controlled. That's what scared him most. Whoever they were, they didn't need to use force. They already had access. He staggered up and grabbed the nearest lamp for light, still disoriented, his thoughts spinning. He went room by room, checking closets, behind doors, under the bed. Empty. But then, taped to his bathroom mirror, was a single photograph that hadn't been there before. It was from years ago. He recognized it instantly. Him, his sister, and Rachel, standing at a fall festival, arms around each other, faces lit up with joy. Only one problem. He didn't remember ever meeting Rachel that day. In fact, he was sure she wasn't even in their lives back then. He stared at the image, trying to make sense of it. Had it been edited? Faked? Or had she been there all along, quietly inserted into their lives without him noticing? That photo unraveled everything. It was the first clear signal that what he thought was reality might be wrong. His mind was clouded with memories, but now he couldn't trust any of them. Could Rachel have been in their lives long before anyone realized? Could she have orchestrated her way into the family not recently, but for years, waiting for the right moment? And then the impossible question hit him. What if Rachel wasn't the one manipulating things? What if she was the one being used all along? The breakthrough came from the unlikeliest source. Marcus's younger sister, Emily, quiet, tech-savvy, and always keeping to herself, reached out via an encrypted messaging app that the brother didn't even know he had installed. She said Marcus had confided in her, just in case anything happened. Said he was digging into an old government project, a program that had been quietly defunded and erased from official records over a decade ago. It was called Project Dahlia, and according to Marcus's notes, it had one goal: to study how implanted memories could alter decision-making, family dynamics, and even identity. The subjects? Unknowing teens in school systems across the country, including, possibly, his sister. It was insane. But the deeper Emily and the brother looked, the more connections they found. Old addresses that no longer existed, school IDs for people who never officially enrolled, identical photos with different names across databases. Rachel was part of it. But maybe not as a villain. Maybe she was placed there, part of a long-abandoned experiment that someone wanted to keep buried. The pieces began to shift in his mind. What if the friend he distrusted wasn't the threat, but the clue? What if the danger wasn't that Rachel was hiding something dark, but that someone else had used her as a vessel for something far more dangerous? But the real twist, the one that shattered everything, came the next night, when his sister finally asked to talk. She looked pale, drawn, like someone holding a truth too heavy for years. She didn't speak right away, just handed him a worn-out journal. Inside were pages dated back almost 10 years, written in her shaky handwriting, describing nightmares about places she'd never been, memories that didn't match reality, and a girl she was convinced she knew long before anyone introduced them. "I lied to you," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Rachel didn't just show up last year. She's been part of my life since I was 11. Only sometimes, she wasn't Rachel." She flipped to a page where a name had been scratched out over and over. Leah. A name that sent chills down the brother's spine. Because Leah was the name of a girl from a missing persons case he remembered seeing on the news as a teenager. A girl who vanished without a trace, no body, no explanation, just gone. And now, somehow, his sister believed that Rachel was Leah. Or had been. Or still was. The lines were blurring. Identities were crossing. And then she said something that froze the air in the room. "They're not trying to hurt us. They're trying to erase us." Like they erased her. Everything the brother thought he knew, about the danger, the friend, the lies, was flipped upside down. This wasn't about catching someone in a secret. This was about surviving something built to be forgotten. And now that they knew too much, the real question wasn't who they could trust, it was how much longer they had before they were erased too. The air in the apartment had grown dense, almost suffocating, and the brother knew there was no more room for indecision. The photograph, the journal, the reappearance of names and faces that shouldn't exist, all of it was closing in like walls pressing from every side. But it wasn't just the fear of being watched anymore, it was the crushing burden of what came next. Because for the first time, he had to consider something that went against everything he'd stood by his entire life. That his sister, the one person he'd always sworn to protect, might be the key to something bigger, something darker, and if he didn't act, he might lose her forever. Yet if he did, he could be handing her over to people who wanted to erase her completely. He couldn't shake the memory of her face when she gave him that journal. She wasn't just scared. She looked like someone who had been living with two versions of herself for years and could no longer tell which one was real. And now, suddenly, people from their past were crawling out of the shadows. Old friends who hadn't been in touch for years suddenly started calling. Strangers seemed to know his name, referencing vague events he had no memory of. Even the family's longtime neighbor, Mr. Carson, quiet, retired, always sweeping his porch, started asking strange questions. "You still seeing your sister these days?" he'd asked, eyes not quite meeting his. "She looks just like her mother did, back when they took her in." The brother froze. Their mother had passed before Rachel ever entered their lives. What did Carson mean by took her in? Took who in? That night, a private message came through on an old social media account he hadn't used in years. It was from Marcus. Or at least, that's what it claimed. The account was inactive since the day Marcus vanished, yet somehow it had posted, cryptic text, coordinates, a date. It was just 2 days away. "Meet me. Don't trust the blood." The brother stared at the message for hours. Was it really Marcus? Or another trap? He couldn't ignore the possibility, especially now that his sister's behavior had shifted. She was more distant, and her phone was constantly going off, calls she wouldn't take around him, messages she'd erase instantly. When he finally confronted her, she broke down, not in fear, but in frustration. "You're not listening," she screamed. "You think I'm the problem, but I'm the only reason they haven't erased you too." That was the moment everything snapped. He demanded answers, and she gave him an ultimatum. Drop it, pretend this never happened and walk away, or go to the meeting and risk dragging them both into something they couldn't walk back from. It was like being told to choose between reality and truth, between the safety of silence and the chaos of revelation. He hated her for putting him in that position. But deep down, he knew she was just as trapped. He wasn't the only one being hunted by memories. She'd been living in the shadows of someone else's story for years, and now the pages were finally catching up. And then the final blow came. An envelope slid under his door in the middle of the night. Inside was a birth certificate, not his sister's, but Rachel's. Only it wasn't issued in their state, not even in their country. It was from a small, off-the-record facility in South America, where birth registration didn't require public filing. The name listed was Leah Merrick, the same Leah who'd disappeared in the news story, the same name scratched out in his sister's journal. The pieces were undeniable now. But just as he reached for his phone to show his sister, it rang, and this time, the voice on the other end wasn't hiding. It was Rachel. Only she wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. Her voice was steady, cold, and deliberate. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said. "Now you have to choose your sister or the truth. You can't save both." The line went dead. The room was silent. And in that stillness, the weight of the impossible choice dropped like a hammer. Whoever Rachel really was, whoever she had once been, she wasn't the helpless girl who'd come into their lives last year. She was something else. And now, the brother was standing on the edge of a decision that could either save his sister or erase everything he thought he knew about his own past. Everything unraveled faster than he could brace for. What began as a flicker of doubt over a Facebook post had morphed into something far more dangerous, something sprawling, calculated, and deeply rooted in people he never thought capable of betrayal. The brother found himself standing not just at the edge of a personal mystery, but at the precipice of a massive, coordinated cover-up, one that had been in motion long before Rachel had ever stepped into their lives. And now, that machine was turning its attention fully on him. It started when he took the birth certificate to the one person he believed could help, their family's attorney, someone who had handled everything from their parents' will to their financial affairs. A man who knew the family's past better than most. But instead of offering guidance, the lawyer's demeanor shifted the second he laid eyes on the document. His voice got quieter, his movements more calculated. He began asking odd questions. Who else had he told? Where was Rachel now? Did he still have the original journal? That sinking feeling in the pit of the brother's stomach twisted tighter with every passing second. When he left the office that day, he didn't take the elevator. He took the stairs and didn't stop until he was 2 blocks away. Within hours, the lawyer's office was closed for renovations, his number disconnected, his social media wiped clean. Someone had flipped the switch, and just like that, another person who once seemed trustworthy was gone, or worse, complicit. Then came the footage. Grainy, shaky video from a street cam he didn't even know existed until someone anonymously emailed it to him. It showed his apartment from across the street, taken just days earlier. It captured Rachel slipping out in the middle of the night, not through the front door, but through the back alley, where a black SUV had been waiting. She got in without hesitation. She wasn't kidnapped. She wasn't coerced. She left willingly. But what chilled him to his core wasn't just that she got into the vehicle. It was that the driver, just barely visible in the reflection of a side mirror, looked eerily like Marcus. The same Marcus they'd all assumed was either dead or hiding. And now, he wasn't just alive, he was in the middle of it. The realization shattered every assumption the brother had clung to. Rachel hadn't just been hiding secrets, she'd been protected by them. Sheltered by a network of people he was only now beginning to see. He began to notice patterns, names repeating across different documents, similar messages sent from separate accounts, phone numbers bouncing through foreign servers. It wasn't just Rachel, or Marcus, or the lawyer. There were others. Teachers from their high school. A nurse from the hospital where their mother had once stayed. Even Mr. Carson, the quiet neighbor, had ties to a research grant from a biotech company that had since vanished from public record. It was as if the entire neighborhood had been selected, curated, and placed around them to observe, contain, and control. The pressure mounted fast. He couldn't sleep without checking the windows every few minutes. He started getting texts from unknown numbers, pictures of himself from that same day, always from behind. Every time he went to the store, to work, even to a friend's house, someone was watching. And then, finally, someone acted. One night, he came home to find the journal gone. Not stolen, not ransacked, just missing, as if it had never existed. In its place, a note written in handwriting he recognized instantly. "You're getting too close. Stop now, or she disappears for good." The emotional weight of that threat crushed him. Because in all the chaos, he'd never stopped thinking like a brother. Never stopped believing he could protect Rachel, even from herself. But now it was clear, this wasn't about protecting her. This was about surviving long enough to understand why she'd been planted in his life to begin with. And the deeper he went, the clearer it became that she wasn't the only one. Others had siblings too, adopted, fostered, long-lost family members who had similar stories, similar disappearances, and the same shadowy connections to people who didn't officially exist. A full-blown operation was happening right under everyone's noses. And the most devastating blow came when he received a call from someone he never expected to betray him, his best friend, Lucas. Calmly, casually, as if nothing had happened, Lucas admitted he had known Rachel wasn't who she said she was. "I didn't want to lie to you," he said, "but I was told if you found out too soon, people would die." He didn't elaborate. He didn't apologize. He simply said, "I had to keep you distracted until they were ready." That's when the line went dead, and with it, the last shred of safety the brother had been clinging to. Now, cornered from all sides, hunted by a web of silent players, and unsure who to trust, he realized the truth was far worse than he ever imagined. This wasn't just about his sister. It was about dozens, maybe hundreds, of people implanted into lives like viruses waiting to activate. And if he didn't move fast, he'd be the next one wiped clean, just another name forgotten in a story no one was ever supposed to discover. He knew the meeting was a trap the moment he received the coordinates, but at this point, walking away wasn't an option anymore. Too many people had vanished. Too many lies had unraveled into devastating truths. The message had come through a burner phone left inside his apartment. No traceable sender, just a string of numbers and a voice memo in Rachel's voice. It wasn't a plea for help. It was calm, composed, and hauntingly specific. "If you want answers, come alone. You already know where."
He did.
The abandoned observatory in the hills, a place tied to childhood memories too dusty to feel real. It had once been a sanctuary, where he and Rachel snuck off to watch meteor showers and trade secrets about the stars. Now it was the final stage, the last curtain, where everything would either come crashing down or finally, horrifyingly, make sense. The moment he stepped inside, the air changed. Cold, sharp, still. He moved carefully through the rotted wood and broken beams, heart pounding against his ribs. In the main dome, the old telescope stood like a relic of a forgotten world, silhouetted against the low, orange glow of portable floodlights. But he wasn't alone. Standing near the instrument, arms folded, eyes unreadable, was Marcus. He hadn't aged the way people normally did. His face looked carved from guilt and secrecy. And beside him, chained to the support pillar, alive but barely conscious, was Rachel. The brother froze, emotions crashing in like a rogue wave. Rage, relief, confusion, and then betrayal. "Why?" he asked, voice cracking. "What the hell is this?" Marcus didn't flinch. "You wouldn't understand unless you saw it for yourself." With a gesture, he activated a projection screen patched to a laptop resting on a makeshift table. What played wasn't surveillance footage or some hidden government file. It was footage from their own childhood. Home videos reprocessed with facial recognition overlays, timestamps, heat signatures. But the most disturbing detail was the metadata. It had been logged and organized not by them, but by an entity labeled Project Ascendant. Every moment of their lives, cataloged and cross-referenced like test subjects. Their birthdays, school projects, even private moments in their home. Someone had been watching them their entire lives, not for protection, but for control. "You were born into it," Marcus said quietly. "So was I.
So was she.
None of us are what we were told." The truth was more than just unsettling, it was foundation-shattering. Their parents hadn't just adopted Rachel. She'd been implanted into the family by an agency posing as a medical nonprofit, part of an experiment to manipulate memory, identity, and genetic loyalty. Rachel's presence had been designed to slowly influence the brother's decisions, perceptions, even his emotional development. She was never just his sister. She was his handler. Until she rebelled. "She tried to get out," Marcus said. "She found out about the secondary protocol, the one that would erase you entirely if she failed to control you. So she ran. And they sent me to fix it." The brother reeled. The childhood laughter, the late-night talks, the shared grief over their parents, it had all been real to him. But to her? How much of it was manufactured? How much of it was real? The emotion welled in his throat as he turned to Rachel, her eyes half open, lips trembling. She mouthed two words he would never forget. "Help me." And that's when everything erupted. A hidden door burst open and two figures stormed in, armed, silent, precise. They moved like military operatives, and they weren't here to negotiate. Marcus shoved the brother aside and drew a concealed weapon, yelling for him to get Rachel out. But something didn't track. The soldiers weren't aiming for Marcus. They were aiming for the brother. He barely dodged the first shot as it shattered the projector behind him. Rachel screamed. Marcus returned fire, yelling over the chaos. "They're not here for her. They're here to shut you down." Because he wasn't just the subject of the experiment. He was the last link in a chain that couldn't be allowed to escape. His genetics had been uniquely reactive to the psychological triggers the project tested. His resistance, his curiosity, his defiance, it had all been recorded, studied, and ultimately deemed dangerous. The twist wasn't that he'd been manipulated. It was that they had failed to control him entirely, and now they wanted to erase the evidence. The brother made his choice in that moment, not because it made sense, but because it felt right. He grabbed Rachel, threw her arm over his shoulder, and made a break for the emergency hatch in the observatory's floor. Marcus covered them, taking 2 bullets before collapsing against the telescope mount. As they escaped into the trees, bleeding, breathless, and broken, the last thing he saw was the observatory going up in flames, the fire consuming every lie, every file, every twisted experiment. They didn't stop running for hours. But the twist, the one that would haunt him for the rest of his life, came weeks later, when he finally traced the origin of the burner phone used to summon him. The IP logs had been bounced through layers of proxy servers, but one location remained static, his own childhood home. A dusty attic hard drive connected to a defunct modem had somehow pinged the network the night before he found the phone. Meaning Rachel hadn't sent the message. Marcus hadn't either. Someone else had. Someone still out there, still watching. And if the project wasn't over, then neither was the hunt. For weeks, he and Rachel moved through the country like shadows, small motels, quiet towns, staying offline, cutting contact with anyone who could be traced. The scars from that night at the observatory were still fresh, both physical and emotional. Marcus hadn't made it out, and neither of them spoke about it much. It was easier to focus on what they could control, staying hidden, staying alive, trying to piece together fragments of their own lives from memories that now felt unreliable. Rachel spent most nights staring at old photographs on her phone, zooming in on faces in the background, wondering how many of them had been watching her instead of just living in the frame. He caught her crying once, silent tears slipping down her cheeks as she stared at a picture of them as kids, arm in arm, smiling in front of a campfire that neither of them could remember building. The hardest part wasn't hiding from the people chasing them. It was learning how to trust themselves again. Every instinct felt compromised, every decision second-guessed. He kept asking himself whether his love for Rachel was real, or if it had been programmed into him. Whether his sense of justice was truly his own, or just another layer of manipulation by Project Ascendant. But the further they got from the fire, from the files, from the endless lies, the more he realized something important. Whatever they had tried to control, they had failed. He still cared. He still wanted the truth, not because someone trained him to want it, but because it mattered. Because people like him and Rachel deserved to exist outside the walls of secret agendas and hidden files. That part was real, and in the end, it was enough. One morning, deep in the Pacific Northwest, they found an old cabin for sale in a remote forest town. No surveillance cameras, no internet, no digital footprint. It was falling apart, but it was quiet, peaceful. The kind of place where nothing had ever been logged or tracked or dissected. They paid cash and moved in that same week. He fixed the roof while she restored the fireplace, and for the first time in years, the silence wasn't terrifying, it was healing. They grew vegetables in a tiny garden out back. They adopted a stray dog that never left their porch. And for a while, it felt like maybe the nightmare was behind them. But one night, as he chopped wood out by the tree line, something glinted in the dirt. A small silver tag, weathered and old, barely visible under layers of moss and soil. He bent down, pried it loose, and turned it over. It was a military-style dog tag with a serial number he didn't recognize and one word stamped beneath it: Echo. The name meant nothing to him, but when he showed it to Rachel, she went pale. She didn't say a word, just turned and walked inside, locking the door behind her. That was when he understood. The project hadn't ended. It had just changed hands. Whatever freedom they thought they'd found was temporary, an intermission, not a conclusion. The fire at the observatory had destroyed the facility, but not the system. The data might have been scattered, but the people who built it, the ones who profited from it, the ones who needed subjects like him and Rachel to exist, they were still out there. Watching. Waiting.
Testing.
He didn't run. Not this time. He pocketed the tag, walked back inside, and sat next to Rachel on the floor. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The quiet between them was full of understanding. They might never know who started this, or why. But they knew each other. And that, in a world full of illusions, was the only truth that still mattered. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the pine trees. A faint hum echoed from somewhere deeper in the forest, low, steady, and unfamiliar. He rose, heart steady, eyes sharp. It wasn't fear anymore that guided him. It was resolve. Because the story wasn't over. And someone had just turned the page.